Now I'd like to invite out Martha Hall Findlay. Welcome, Martha. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
So by now you know it has become customary for me to invite you to give an insight into Martha Hall Findlay that might not come out of the questions that have been assigned.
No, but before I do, can I say congratulations again to you for doing such a great job in Calgary Centre. We almost won that seat with Harvey Locke, So the personal thing, I have to laugh. So I'm listening to Mark Garneau, right? And he's talking about cooking and vacuuming. Okay, you have to understand, I hate vacuuming. You know what I mean now.
That was my wife laughing in the front row.
So I hate vacuuming, and I so do not cook. Okay, I am so all over cut up hot dogs and craft dinner. 3 kids, right? You know this. But I think maybe something that people don't know about me is that I've done a lot. By the time I was 26, I had 3 kids, I had 2 degrees, and for the students in the audience, I had a pretty significant student debt. And in that alone, you do a lot, you accomplish a lot, but you also understand what a lot of Canadians are going through, whether they're actually students, or in my case, 3 kids who are also now paying off their student debts. We're very fortunate to have a system of student loans and grants in this country, and having benefited from that, it's something else to be able to understand what a lot of Canadians go through.
So I'm going to shift to this question of supply management, which I think it's something you're interested in. And the supply management being the topic of how we develop our commodities, particularly like poultry and milk, and how we sell it in the openness of markets. And I invite you to comment on that, because I know you think a lot about that.
Thank you, yes. Well, I have actually done a great deal of work on this particular topic. And I appreciate the opportunity, because I know a couple of the other candidates have mentioned this. One of the things I have to stress is that supply management is a protectionist, what would otherwise be regarded as a cartel now, that only actually applies to 1/15 of all Canadian farmers. So when you hear other people talk about farmers and agriculture in Canada, 93% of Canadian farming is not actually supply managed. It's a tiny fraction. It only applies to dairy, poultry, and eggs. When it was brought in the 1970s, it was a great system. We had 140,000 dairy farmers. They were suffering price volatility. It was a challenge. We now have barely more than 10,000 dairy farmers in the entire country. They also now do very well. The average dairy farmer makes significantly more money than an average Canadian family, and sits on well over $2 million in assets. The challenge with supply management, so this is an issue that needs to be changed, but it can absolutely be done win-win. We did it with our wine industry in Canada. There was all the worry about protectionism, about losing protection for our wine. We entered free trade, and lo and behold, we now have a thriving wine industry. We can absolutely do this with dairy, poultry, and eggs. We absolutely can regulate food safety. That has nothing to do with the economics, actually, of supply management. We talk about trade. When we talk about we have entered trade agreements, so yes, we have, but in every trade agreement where we have finally concluded one, we've had to give up significantly other things for the right to keep our supply management for a little bit. We are exporting jobs. Processors are setting up outside the country because at our price of milk, they can't compete internationally. But I want to stress something, Harvey, the people who suffer the most in this, and remember, dairy and poultry farms are now doing very well, thank you, and they're a tiny fraction of our farmers. The people who pay the most, the average Canadian family is paying hundreds of dollars more for basics of milk, cheese, eggs, and poultry. Ask anybody from Vancouver who drives across the border every weekend to get cheap milk and eggs. But the people who suffer the most, it's regressive. The people who suffer the most proportionately are the single-parent families in this country, who are the ones who are the most vulnerable. They are the ones who should have affordable access to basic nutrition. And I will add, the many Aboriginal communities where the price of food is huge. It is unconscionable to me that in our country now we continue to have a system which we can dismantle in a win-win way, but where the least capable in our society are paying the most for basic nutrition in particular for their kids. It can absolutely be done in a win-win way.
Changeons de sujet. Est-ce que vous pensez que le gouvernement fédéral devrait jouer un rôle direct dans le développement des systèmes de transport dans les grandes villes canadiennes?
Oui, absolument. Absolument. Mais ça doit être quelque chose que le gouvernement fédéral fait avec tous les gouvernements provinciaux et territoriaux, mais aussi avec les municipalités. C'est important d'avoir tous les trois à la table ensemble. Je vais changer en anglais parce que c'est un sujet très important pour les gens de Colombie-Britannique maintenant. So I'm switching into English because this happens to be an issue that's of very big importance to the people in the interior of BC right now, as an example. And it's a great example of how we really do need a national transportation strategy. So we subsidize via rail. We subsidize, to some extent, public transit in the cities, but you know, I'm from Toronto, we'd love to have more. We subsidize highways in the building of our highways. We subsidize airports. But in the interior of British Columbia, the only system to get between some of the smaller centers is a private bus. And they're now cutting back private bus service significantly between some of these smaller urban centers. These people have no choice. They don't have rail. They don't have air. It just highlights the fact that we still haven't gotten our heads around what is a public good in the sense of transportation. So in that sense, we really do need to have that work with all of the levels of government. I will add that transporting goods and people is very important, but we also need to transport ideas and content and communication. And to me, right up there with transportation has to be absolute high-speed internet across the country. We still have far too many unserved and underserved areas in terms of communication in this country.
I'm giving everyone the opportunity to speak to this question of foreign investment in the Canadian economy. This is a slightly different focus, though. Does it matter which country is involved in that foreign investment? Does it matter if it's a private foreign business or a government-owned foreign business?
That's a great question. Obviously, discussed a fair bit recently here in Canada with CNOC and Nexon and the Progress Petronas deals. There is a difference between a state-owned enterprise and a completely private enterprise. State-owned enterprises do operate differently commercially, different expectations. So as a country, when somebody expresses interest in foreign investment, and I support foreign investment, we know that foreign investment helps increase jobs, it helps with Canadian prosperity. So we want Canada to be open for business. We don't want Canada to be for sale, but we want Canada absolutely to be open for business and to have investment that is done on our terms, absolutely, and we have to be prepared to enforce those commitments. But yes, it does make a difference. Where we need to be careful is that we are objective. I mean, I watched the Harper government. I mean, they were like deer in the headlights. I mean, it's an embarrassment internationally, no criteria. We've been calling for several years. We need greater criteria in the Investment Canada Act. We need greater criteria in terms of what are you saying the net benefit test should be. I used to be a lawyer. I used to work a lot in Investment Canada Act issues, so this has been there a little bit. But, of course, they haven't. They haven't clarified what the criteria should be. And each time one of these came along, you know, there was, oh my goodness, what do we do? And frankly, when we are so unclear in what our expectations are, it can actually turn away foreign investors. But state-owned enterprises are different. Where they come from, though, we have to be very careful about being objective. We know there's some regimes that we feel more comfortable with, but I do believe as Canadians, we have to be very objective about the source of foreign investment, for sure make differences for state-owned enterprises.
We've talked a lot about crime prevention. Are you a person who believes we should construct more prisons and have mandatory sentences, or a person who thinks we should focus on the sociology of crime, it's a matter of preventing it.
I only laugh her because that's such a lob. What am I going to say? Do I really think mandatory minimums? Do I really think we should put more people in jail? Of course not. I mean, good heavens, you have the Republican right movement in the United States who are all saying, we already now know that our tough on crime didn't work. I mean, goodness, I've never thought that Martha Findlay and Newt Gingrich would be saying the same thing, but even those guys are saying tough on crime never worked. In fact, it backfired. Listen, I listened to Stephen Harper and Vic Taves talk about victims' rights, victims' rights. The most important right for a victim is to never become a victim in the first place. We know that the best way to be tough on crime is to be tough on the causes of crime. You've heard a number of people speak already about the incredible lack of attention we're paying on mental illness, mental disabilities. The criminal justice system is not the place to deal with those challenges. We know the answer is not putting more people in jail for longer. No, we're liberal, but I will volunteer something. One of the challenges I've had in the last number of years, and this is where I talk about the courage that we need as liberals. There were too many times in the last few years where we were saying, we had crime bills. We had these crime bills coming up for us to vote on, and we were saying, we know they're wrong. We know it's wrong to put more people in jail for longer. We know we need to focus on prevention. But well, we don't want to look like we're soft on crime. We don't want Stephen Harper to make us look like we're soft on crime. We voted for far too many of those crime bills. We need courage in the Liberal Party. We need to stand for what we believe.
Well, Martha, thank you. Thank you very much. Martha Findlay.